Hello? I'm Thalassa. I was supposed to get married last month. The dress was steamed, the flowers were perfect, and the guests were seated. Except one person was missing. My sister. The same sister who said my fiancé wanted to run away with her. The same sister who showed me fake texts 1 hour before I walked down the aisle. But here's the part no one saw coming. What I did next. What happens when you've been quiet your whole life and finally decide not to be? And what kind of family punishes you? For telling the truth. I stepped through the front door of my mother's house, the late afternoon sun casting long lines across the hardwood floors. The scent of lemon cleaner hung in the air, and somewhere in the back, I heard the faint click of silverware. The pre-wedding dinner was supposed to be casual, just immediate family, some wine, warm smiles. But the tension curled in my gut told me it wouldn't stay that way. Everyone had already gathered in the living room. My mother, Ivella, stood proudly next to the new family portrait she had just mounted above the fireplace. Her voice carried over the soft hum of conversation as she gestured toward it. "Isn't it beautiful?" she said. "Finally, a real family photo, framed and everything." I stepped closer, scanning the image. My eyes landed on Sable first, of course, always in the center. Her husband, Cormac, stood beside her, his smile wide, practiced. Darian, my fiancé, was tucked slightly off to the side. And me? I was in the frame, sure, but barely. My face was turned, caught mid-blink. The lighting shadowed half my features. I looked like someone who happened to wander into the shot by accident. A cousin, a guest. Not the daughter, not the bride-to-be. Mom must have seen my face because she reached out and squeezed my arm gently. "You always hated the camera, Thalassa. Don't take it personally." I nodded, swallowing the sharp comment that rose in my throat. Not today. Dinner moved into the dining room. Roast chicken, buttered rolls. Crystal glasses clinked lightly, filled with a Chardonnay I used to love, but now only tolerated. The conversation skipped around wedding topics, menus, place cards, floral colors. When dessert was cleared, Mom stood to give a toast. She tapped her glass with a fork and looked around with a polished smile. "I just want to say how proud I am of my girls. Sable, you've been a rock in this family. And Cormac, you've truly been a gift to us. Darian, welcome officially to the family. We're so lucky to have you." That was it. No mention of me. No, "Congratulations, Thalassa." Not even my name. There was a beat. A pause just long enough for my absence in her words to echo around the room. A few guests looked toward me, their eyes flickering with the kind of sympathy you don't want. I reached for my glass of water. My hand was steady, but my stomach turned. Later, after helping Mom clear the dishes, even though she didn't ask Sable to lift a finger, I made an excuse about needing to finalize some wedding vendor calls. She smiled like she believed me. "Always so responsible," she said. Just like Sable. Outside, the air was thick with Sacramento summer heat. I sat in my car for 10 full minutes before turning the key in the ignition. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at the dashboard, wondering how I had become so good at disappearing. On the way home, I passed the same streets I'd known since childhood. The elementary school where Sable and I had shared a bike ride once. The park where she'd kissed Marcus, the boy I liked, while I watched from the bleachers. Even then, she'd had a way of taking what she wanted and leaving me the silence behind it. At home, I pulled out an old notebook. The leather cover had worn soft at the edges. I hadn't used it in years. But tonight, I needed a place to put it all. The slights, the comments, the things no one would remember but me. Not to post online, not to confront anyone. Just to remember, because I was tired of second-guessing my own memories, tired of telling myself maybe I was imagining it. I wasn't. I opened the notebook to a clean page and wrote, "Today, I vanished from a room I was standing in." And then I thought of the picture again, the portrait, the way I faded into the frame, like a smudge at the edge of someone else's life. It looked like I wasn't meant to be remembered. But I'd remember this. I'd remember everything from now on. I didn't say anything when her hand brushed Darian's shoulder. It happened during the cake tasting 2 mornings after the dinner at Mom's. The bakery was small, with those industrial pendant lights, and an open-air fridge humming faintly behind the counter. We were standing at the side table, the one they use for couples finalizing wedding details, when Sable reached over and smoothed a wrinkle in Darian's collar. "You always wrinkle your dress shirts like a teenager," she teased, her voice sing-song, like she'd known him forever. Darian laughed lightly, not seeing what I saw. Not seeing that smile, one too familiar. That smile meant she'd claimed something, again. I excused myself after we finished the tasting, told Darianne I had a call, though I had nothing scheduled. I just needed to breathe where she wasn't. I sat in my car outside the bakery, looking at the people walking by with their dogs and strollers, and for a few minutes tried to convince myself I was overreacting. But I wasn't. I've seen her do this before. When I was 16, I liked a boy named Marcus. He had this uneven haircut, drove his older brother's hand-me-down Ford, and always smelled faintly of cinnamon gum. I told Sable I thought he was cute, just in passing, just in that teenage way that didn't mean much. Until it did. She rolled her eyes and said, "Not really my type. You can have him." 2 weeks later, Marcus walked into our backyard barbecue with his arm slung around Sable like it belonged there. She wore my favorite sundress that day. I sat on a lawn chair with a paper plate full of baked beans I couldn't taste, while Mom smiled like Sable had just walked off the cover of a magazine. No one noticed me. Not then. Not now. So when I pulled into Mom's driveway later that afternoon, it was with clenched teeth and a silent resolve. I was there to pick up the heirloom necklace, Grandma's opal and gold piece that had been passed from daughter to daughter. Mom had said she'd keep it safe until I was ready. I stepped into the foyer, wiping my hands on my jeans. Sable was already there, standing in front of the hall mirror, and she was wearing it. The necklace. I froze. "Oh," she said, catching my reflection behind her. "Mom gave it to me last week. Isn't it gorgeous? I thought it'd go perfect with your colors." With my colors. I turned to Mom, who was now standing at the end of the hall, holding a folded towel like she hadn't just detonated a grenade in the middle of my chest. "You told me you were keeping it for my wedding," I said, my voice low but steady. Mom shrugged. "Well, sweetheart, Sable was supposed to get married first. She just didn't get around to it. This was always meant for her, really." Meant for her. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just said I had somewhere to be and left. Darian found me that evening sitting on our apartment balcony, a glass of Merlot in hand, and the necklace, not mine, in my head. He crouched beside my chair and took my hand. "That necklace doesn't matter to me," he said. "What matters is you." But that's not the point. It's not about the stone, or the gold, or tradition. It's that it was mine, until someone else decided it wasn't. I nodded, said nothing. He stayed with me until the sun disappeared behind the city's hazy edge. After he went inside, I pulled the old notebook from my purse. I started with a list, small moments at first. The trophy I won in middle school that got tucked behind Sable's cheerleading plaque. The time Mom gave her my coat at the winter formal because it matched her dress better. The way people assumed I was younger, even though it was just 5 years. The necklace, of course. The boy. The smile. And now, Darian. She didn't need to take what was mine, but she always did, because she knew no one would stop her. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. Maybe it was the weight of anticipation, or dread. I couldn't tell anymore. I sat in the passenger seat of Darian's car, just outside the print shop on 21st Street, the one Sable had recommended. Sunlight streaked through the windshield as I peeled the flap open. The first invitation on top was pristine. Thick cream cardstock, gold embossed lettering, a shimmer to the foil. But my eyes locked on one detail and wouldn't let go. Darian and Sable. Not Thalassa. I flipped through the rest, faster and faster, as if doing so would force a correction to appear. But every single one said the same thing. Sable's name. My fiancé's name. Together. Darian was outside, talking to the shop clerk about delivery times. I stayed frozen in the car, heart pounding, hands gripping the edge of the envelope. Once we got back to the apartment, I brought it up carefully. They used the wrong name, I said, trying to keep my voice even. He frowned, taking one out of the box. What the hell? We called the shop. The manager apologized profusely, some kind of template mix-up. Apparently, Sable had used them a few years ago when she was engaged to someone else. The same file had somehow resurfaced. Ivella, when she heard, waved it off with a tight smile. It's just a silly print error. These things happen. People will understand. No need to waste more money. It wasn't about the money, and it wasn't just a mistake. I slid one misprinted invitation into my nightstand drawer that evening. Not to fix it, to keep it. Because sometimes, proof matters more than resolution. A few nights later, Darian and I sat in the living room, reviewing the final version of the wedding slideshow. The TV glowed soft yellow across the couch cushions. He clicked through the images. Our first date, hiking in Tahoe, Sunday brunches downtown. Then one photo stopped me cold. It was us, standing under the oak tree in his parents' backyard, one of the photos we'd taken during our engagement shoot. Below it, in cursive text, Sable and Darian, engaged July 2023. My breath caught. Wait, pause that, I said, already reaching for the remote. Darian froze the frame. He stared at it. That's wrong. The captions, I said quietly. You didn't write them, did you? No, I thought the freelancer was handling it. Sable said she had a great editor, someone affordable. Of course she did. I didn't say another word. I just stood up, walked into the bathroom, and locked the door. There, I sat on the edge of the tub. Not crying, not screaming, just breathing. If I cried over every moment I'd been sidelined, I'd never stop. But this wasn't about tears. It was about a pattern, one too specific to be accidental. One mistake, maybe. 2? 3? That's intention. Later that night, while Darian was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook again. I didn't want to confront her, not yet. What would be the point? She'd smile, tilt her head, say something like, "Oh no, I'm so sorry, that must have been a miscommunication." I didn't need apologies, I needed clarity. So I began writing down every anomaly, date, time, what was said, who was present. I labeled the invitation misprint, the necklace handoff, the slideshow error, the hand on Darian's shoulder, the toast I was left out of. No one would believe me if I said this was sabotage, because Sable was clever. She never raised her voice, never snapped, never did anything you could prove. But I was done needing permission to see what was in front of me. By morning, I had 3 full pages. That weekend, we were invited to a bridal brunch at Mom's, mostly her friends, some of Sable's, a few of my former classmates she insisted on inviting. I came early to help set up. The kitchen smelled like citrus and vanilla. I laid out the napkins, fluffed the hydrangeas. Sable breezed in 20 minutes late, carrying her sunglasses atop her head like a crown. She gave Mom a kiss on the cheek and spun around with a bright, breezy voice. Everyone ready to celebrate the real bride? A few people laughed. Most thought it was a joke, but I saw her glance sideways at me. She knew exactly what she was doing. I smiled back, because now so did I. It was subtle at first, small moments. Her fingers brushing Darian's jacket sleeve while pretending to fix lint. Laughing too loudly at his dry jokes, even when no one else found them funny. Complimenting his cologne with that drawn-out sound I'd heard her use when she wanted attention. I started noticing it more during the final prep meetings. One afternoon, we were at the florist's, choosing arrangements for the centerpieces. I was halfway through debating between eucalyptus or Dusty Miller when I looked up and caught Sable straightening Darian's tie. He wasn't facing her. He was listening to the florist explain pricing, but she was right there, fingers smoothing down his chest like it was second nature, like she'd done it 100 times. No one said a word. Not the florist. Not the intern making notes. Not even Darian, just me. I didn't say anything then either, but my stomach twisted. That evening, while we unpacked catering samples in the kitchen, I almost brought it up. He was opening the container of roasted vegetable skewers while I set out forks. "Did you notice Sable today?" I asked, keeping my tone light. He looked up. "Yeah, she was helpful with the centerpiece stuff." "Helpful?" I repeated. "Yeah, I mean, she knows what Mom likes." I let it go. The last thing I wanted was to sound paranoid. Or worse, jealous. But as the week went on, it got harder to swallow. The day of my final dress fitting, Rivka was supposed to meet me at the boutique downtown. She was the only bridesmaid I'd kept close since college, and I trusted her judgment, until recently. She texted me 5 minutes before the appointment. "Sable's running late," she wrote. "I'm just gonna ride with her instead." No apology, no explanation. Just a subtle shift, like gravity had tilted, and Sable was at the center now. When they finally walked in, 15 minutes after I'd already stepped into the gown, they were laughing, arms linked like high school besties. I caught Rivka giving Sable that admiring glance she used to reserve for me. "I swear," Rivka said, looking me up and down. Sable's energy just elevates the whole vibe. She didn't mean it to sting. Or maybe she did. I smiled, adjusted my veil, and focused on my reflection. I didn't say anything, not there, not then. But inside, something started cracking. After the fitting, we went to grab coffee nearby. Or, I should say, they did. I told them I needed to take a call and slipped away down the sidewalk, pulling out my phone even though there were no missed calls. I ended up at the riverfront, watching boats drift by in slow silence. I stayed there until the sun dipped low and the wind picked up. The trees swayed softly along the banks, and I sat on a bench alone, letting myself breathe again. That night, back at the apartment, Darian asked if everything was okay. "You've been skipping things," he said gently. "Fittings, walkthroughs, even the tasting yesterday. Are you overwhelmed?" I hesitated. "Maybe a little. You know we don't have to do this big. If it's too much, we can simplify." "It's not the size," I said. "It's the noise." He didn't press, just reached for my hand and held it. I appreciated that about him. He never tried to fix things he didn't understand, but he also didn't see what I saw. Or maybe he chose not to. In the days that followed, I stopped asking questions. I showed up less, said less, smiled more. They called it bridal nerves. I called it self-preservation. By Friday, the rehearsal dinner was set. Mom sent out a group text reminding everyone of the schedule and attire. "Cocktail casual. Keep it clean, keep it classic," she added, as if we were prepping for a magazine shoot. I arrived early to the restaurant, hoping to settle in before the crowd filled the room. I took a seat near the back, intentionally quiet, intentionally unnoticed. I watched people trickle in. Sable made her entrance with perfect timing, in a white silk jumpsuit. A white jumpsuit. To my rehearsal dinner. The room clapped like it was her party. When dessert was served, the manager brought over a mic for toasts. Mom stood up, smoothing her blouse, and smiled at the room. "I just want to thank everyone for coming," she began. "Weddings are about family, about love, about standing by each other." I reached for my water, already anticipating the gloss over. She looked around. "And now, I'd love for someone who embodies all of those things to say a few words. Sable, sweetheart, would you?" Sable took the mic with practiced grace. I didn't breathe. Not because I was surprised anymore, but because I finally knew. It wasn't accidental. It never had been. She stood there like it was her wedding. Perfect posture, chin slightly lifted, voice dripping with just the right mix of vulnerability and charm. When Sable took the microphone from Mom's hand, she didn't even glance in my direction. She stepped into the moment like she'd been rehearsing it her whole life. And maybe she had. I'm just so honored to be part of this special day, she began, clasping the mic with both hands like she was accepting an award. Thalassa is not just my sister, she's my first best friend. And Darien. Well, we're lucky to have someone like him joining this family. People smiled. Some nodded. A few looked misty-eyed already. She went on. Family isn't just blood. It's about showing up, being there, being a rock when others need to lean. That last line twisted something sharp in my chest. I'd shown up for everything. The planning, the tastings, the fittings. I'd juggled timelines and invoices and RSVP lists. I'd given up weekends, lost sleep, swallowed frustration. And now, I stood in the corner of my own rehearsal dinner, while the woman who'd done the bare minimum delivered a monologue like she'd orchestrated the whole thing. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. No one asked if I wanted to say anything. I held my champagne glass steady, smiled just enough to avoid questions, and looked at my mother. Ivella gave me a small approving nod, then turned away. After dessert was served, some kind of passion fruit tart Sable had pushed for, I stepped outside without saying a word. The restaurant's patio overlooked a row of twinkling string lights and a shallow courtyard fountain. I leaned against the wooden railing, my hands gripping it tighter than they needed to. A minute passed, then footsteps behind me. Darien. Hey, he said gently. You okay? I nodded, but didn't turn around. She's really good at that, he added. Speaking in public. You know, she's got presence. That word again. Presence. Do you think I don't? I asked. He hesitated. No, that's not what I meant. I just meant she's used to the spotlight. And I'm supposed to stay in the dark? He stepped closer, touched my elbow. That's not fair. No, I said. It's not. He waited, letting the silence breathe. Finally, I turned to him. If anything goes wrong tomorrow, I'm not going to stand by and hope someone fixes it. I won't let anyone hijack what's mine again. He nodded slowly. I wouldn't expect you to. Back home that night, I washed off the makeup, took off the dress, and sat in my robe at the edge of my bed. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I could hear Darien moving around in the kitchen, rinsing glasses, turning off lights. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Mom. Can we talk? I've been thinking. I stared at the message for a moment, then typed, sure. She called a few minutes later. Her voice was soft, almost motherly, the kind of tone I remembered from childhood stories and cold nights. I've been wondering, she began, if we should delay the ceremony. I blinked. Why? I just think tensions are running a little high. Sable was really upset tonight. She felt like she had to say something to hold it all together. Sable felt like she had to hold my wedding together? Well, you seemed on edge, sweetheart. I am on edge, Mom. I've spent weeks trying to keep this day from being swallowed whole. She sighed. I just don't want this turning into drama. It already has, I said, but I'm still getting married tomorrow. There was a pause on the line. I know this means a lot to you, she said finally. No, I said, standing up, walking into the kitchen to turn off the last light. It's not about what it means, it's about who it belongs to. I ended the call before she could respond. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The light barely peeked through the blinds. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and flipped open my notebook. No journaling, just one line at the top of a fresh page. Let them underestimate me. By noon, the hair and makeup team would arrive. The bridesmaids would begin filing in. Sable would flash her practiced smile and pretend nothing was off. But I wouldn't pretend anymore, because deep down, I knew something was coming. I just didn't expect it to arrive 1 hour before I walked down the aisle. The knock on the suite door came just as my stylist was finishing the final curl. I glanced at the clock, 58 minutes until the ceremony. Can you give us a second? I asked the makeup artist gently, rising from the chair in my robe. She nodded, sensing something in my tone, and slipped quietly into the adjoining room. I opened the door to find Sable standing there. Her eyes were rimmed red, mascara faintly smudged like she'd wiped it with the back of her hand. She wasn't dressed for the ceremony, just jeans and a pale blue blouse, sleeves pushed up, like she hadn't decided if she was staying. "I didn't want to do this," she said before I could say anything. Her voice cracked like she'd rehearsed this line in her head a dozen times, just waiting for the curtain to rise. I let her in. She hovered near the window, arms crossed, then turned slowly. "I wouldn't feel right letting you walk into this blind." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Her pauses filled enough of the silence. "I've been talking to Darian," she said, "for a while now." A flicker of movement in my chest, like a door slammed in the distance. He told me he's been second-guessing this wedding, that he didn't know how to tell you, that he felt trapped. And then, he said he had feelings for me." My lips pressed together, a breath caught at the top of my chest. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, unlocking it with a flourish I'd seen too many times. Like a magician revealing a trick. She handed it to me. I stared at the screen. The messages were casual at first, then flirty, then bold. "Darian, I can't keep pretending." "Darian, wish it were you at the altar." "Darian, let's just go. Just you and me, all signed with emojis. Wink faces, heart symbols, thumbs up." I handed the phone back. "He doesn't use emojis," I said. "What?" "Darian doesn't use emojis, not ever. He texts like a 60-year-old accountant. Periods, full words, no shorthand." She blinked. The red in her eyes suddenly seemed more like a performance than a breakdown. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. She swallowed. "Because I thought you should know the truth," I nodded. "Then why didn't you go to him? Why tell me?" She hesitated. That was the tell. I turned and walked to the vanity, lifted the veil, and settled it over my hair. I clipped it in place, watching her through the mirror. There was a knock at the hallway door, a soft knock, not the kind you use when you're delivering towels. I stepped past her, cracked it open. It was one of the hotel staff, a young woman with a name tag that said Lonnie. "Miss?" she said, voice low. "I'm sorry. This probably isn't my place, but I recognized you from the rehearsal yesterday. I just thought you should know." I stepped fully into the hallway, closing the door behind me just enough to muffle our voices. "She was in your fiancé's room last night, Sable. She said she forgot something from the welcome dinner, but she was there almost 20 minutes. My heart didn't race. It didn't even stutter. I just nodded. "Thank you for telling me." She left quickly, eyes apologetic, cheeks flushed. I went back inside. Sable stood exactly where I'd left her. I walked past her, sat back in the chair, and fixed the curl that had loosened on my left temple. "I hope you're proud of this performance," I said softly. Her face twisted. "I didn't come here to fight." "No," I said. "You came here to win." I adjusted my dress, smoothed the bodice, pulled my shoulders back. She watched me for a long second, then finally asked, "So, what are you going to do?" I met her gaze in the mirror. "I'm going to walk down that aisle," I said, "and you're going to stay the hell out of my way." She didn't argue. She just picked up her purse and left. As the door closed behind her, I picked up my phone. Not to call Darian, but to call someone she never thought I would. My hand moved before my mind did. I didn't call Darian. Instead, I opened Instagram, found the little green dot next to Cormac's name, and hit the video call icon. Sable was still standing by the door, arms folded, face set like she'd won something. When she noticed what I was doing, her expression shifted, narrowed. I could see her trying to figure it out. She leaned forward slightly, eyes darting to my phone screen. She thought I was calling Darian. She didn't speak, just watched. The screen flickered, then Cormac's face appeared. Disoriented, pillow lines still faintly pressed into his cheek. He blinked into the front camera, shirtless, his hair a mess. Thalassa? He asked, confused. Sable stiffened like she'd been slapped. Hi, Cormac, I said evenly. My voice was too calm. It almost scared me. Sorry to bother you, but I needed a quick reality check before walking down the aisle. His eyebrows pinched. What's going on? I turned the phone slightly so Sable could see the screen. I knew she was watching every pixel of his face, hoping to find a crack in his confusion. Your wife just came to my suite, I continued. She told me Darian has been in love with her, that he begged her to call off my wedding so they could run away together. She showed me texts, said they've been secretly talking for weeks. Cormac didn't answer right away. Then he sighed and leaned back, scrubbing his face with his hand. Jesus Christ, he muttered. She said she wanted to test you, that if you were weak enough to believe it, then you didn't deserve him. I didn't blink. I didn't speak. I just let the silence do its work. Sable lunged forward. End the call, she hissed. You don't understand. He wasn't supposed to answer. I kept the phone steady. She's been drafting fake conversations on her phone all week, Cormac added. I saw her. I thought she was just venting. I didn't think she'd actually go through with it. Sable reached again, more forcefully this time. You're blowing everything up over a joke. A joke? I asked, pulling the phone back before she could grab it. Because you thought humiliating me on my wedding day would be funny? Cormac stared through the screen, his expression shifting from guilt to disgust. I'm packing, he said. I'll be gone before your ceremony ends. And with that, I ended the call. Sable stood frozen, breath shallow. I set the phone down on the counter and turned to her. You wanted a moment? I said. There it is, one to remember. Her face crumbled, not from remorse, but from exposure. She didn't apologize. She didn't defend herself. She didn't say a word. She stormed out. Not 5 minutes later, my mother burst into the room like a storm front. What the hell did you just do? She snapped. Sable is inconsolable. I turned slowly. She was dressed for the ceremony in a soft mauve suit, hair pinned in a polished twist. Her eyes were wild, not with concern for me, but with fear that something might stain the day's perfection. She's crying, I said. I'm the one she tried to ruin, and you're upset because she's crying? Mom threw her hands up. This was supposed to be peaceful, just one day without drama. I didn't start it. Well, you didn't have to escalate it. I took a slow step forward. She tried to sabotage my wedding. You're defending her? She's fragile, Mom whispered. And I'm invisible, I replied. She didn't answer, just stood there, breathing hard. I walked to the closet, pulled the door open, and retrieved my gown. Held it carefully, like something sacred. Tell her to stay out of my wedding, I said, and out of my marriage. Mom didn't move. Her mouth opened, then closed. Finally, she turned and walked out. After she left, the suite went quiet again. The makeup artist returned and picked up her brushes without asking questions. I sat down in the chair, eyes forward, voice calm. I'm ready now, I told her. And I was. She didn't come to the ceremony. Not that I expected her to, but her absence wasn't quiet. It echoed. Her empty seat was more noticeable than if she'd stood in the aisle screaming. It was the kind of silence that draws glances, hushes conversations. People noticed. The whispers started before the music did. Her name floated through the garden like pollen, soft, invasive. Where's Sable? I thought she was giving a reading. I saw her crying earlier. I didn't explain. I didn't owe anyone that. The venue staff led me to the end of the aisle. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and champagne. My dress rustled lightly as I walked, veil catching the breeze. Darian stood ahead, in a tailored navy suit, hands clasped, face steady. And when he looked at me, there was no flicker of doubt, no hint of the chaos that had come before. Just calm, just him. We didn't have readers. No unity candle, no dramatic vows scribbled the night before. I had asked for one thing, simple, solid, ours. As the officiant spoke, I felt my heart slow for the first time in days. I took Darian's hands in mine, stared into the face of the man I almost lost to someone else's lie. And I thought, not about Sable, not about Mom, not about anyone who hadn't earned their place in this moment, but about how I'd made it here anyway. "You made it yours," Darian whispered, just before we said, "I do." "All of it." After the ceremony, while guests gathered for the reception and posed under the string lights, I returned briefly to the bridal suite. I needed a moment alone. On the vanity, 2 envelopes waited. No name, no note. Just my name scrawled in handwriting I knew too well. The first was from Edra, my grandmother. Her writing shaky, but still hers. "Thalassa, you were always the quiet one. Not because you had less to say, but because you watched more closely than any of us. I see you, I always have. Love, Grandma Edra." I closed my eyes and held the letter for a long time, pressed it against my chest. The second envelope was older. Yellowed edges. The handwriting wasn't Edra's. It was my father's. He'd passed when I was 12. This letter had been sealed for over 2 decades. "My little girl, one day, someone's going to push you too far, and you'll stand up, not to fight, but to walk away. That's when you'll win. You won't need to raise your voice to be heard. You've always had more strength than the rest of us combined. Love, Dad." I didn't cry because I was sad. I cried because, for the first time in my life, I felt seen without needing to explain myself. That evening, after the dancing and the last champagne toast, Darian and I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, barefoot and quiet. I showed him the letters. He didn't say much, just kissed the top of my hand and told me he was proud of me. 2 days later, the news broke. Cormac had filed for divorce. There was no dramatic press release, no online tirade, just a quiet statement to the few who mattered. Betrayal doesn't always wear someone else's clothes. Sometimes it's in the face you wake up next to. Mom called. I didn't answer. Sable went quiet online. No more curated selfies, no more passive-aggressive captions. Just gone. The silence was almost peaceful. I placed both letters in the top drawer of my desk, right next to the misprinted wedding invitation, the one with her name. It was no longer a wound. It was a reminder of what I overcame, of what I took back. It came 2 weeks after the wedding, on a quiet Tuesday morning. The sun had barely risen over the rooftops, casting long amber streaks across my kitchen counter. I had just finished my second cup of coffee, the kind you drink slowly, not because you need the caffeine, but because you finally have time to savor stillness. My phone buzzed once, a short, clipped vibration that didn't feel urgent. I flipped it over, already expecting it to be spam or a group chat I'd muted. But it wasn't. It was from Mom. "We should talk. When you're ready." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the reply bubble for far too long. But I didn't type anything. I locked the phone and left it on the counter. By then, most of the fallout had already settled. Sable had moved in with a friend from college, someone who still thought she was misunderstood rather than manipulative. I hadn't spoken to her, and she hadn't tried to speak to me. I guess we were finally on the same page about something. Cormac's divorce filing became public after the wedding photos went up. His only comment, through a friend, was cold but pointed. "Some betrayals aren't accidental. They're calculated." He didn't mention her by name. He didn't have to. Sable wiped her social media accounts. No more carefully curated photos of weekend hikes or "sisters are built-in best friends" captions. Just gone. People in the family talked, of course, but not to me. They whispered among themselves at brunches and baby showers, clutched pearls over texts. I could feel it, like radio static around my name, but no one called. No one visited. And I was fine with that. One afternoon later that week, I brought a small bouquet of marigolds and tea roses to Idra's nursing home. She didn't say much when I arrived, just patted the spot on the bench next to her and smiled like she'd been expecting me. We sat for a while under the old oak tree by the courtyard. The breeze was gentle, the sun warm on our backs. You know, she said, finally breaking the silence, I never worried about you. I looked at her, a little startled. You always had a quiet kind of fire, the kind people overlook, until it burns something down. I chuckled. That sounds more like Sable. Edra shook her head. Sable was firecrackers, loud, flashy, but gone in seconds. You're the one they never saw coming. That evening, after dinner, I opened the package from our wedding photographer. Inside were the final prints, wrapped carefully, tied with twine, labeled in soft script. The photo I chose for our living room was one I hadn't expected to love. It wasn't staged. It wasn't even centered. Darian was lifting my hand, his mouth open in a laugh I didn't remember. I was caught mid-smile, veil blown back slightly, eyes locked on him. In the background, there were guests, chairs, the altar. But none of it mattered. I placed the frame above our new fireplace, a small matte black mantle we'd installed ourselves in the apartment we moved into after the honeymoon. Nothing grand. But it was ours, and this time, I was in the center. That same evening, I reread the message from Mom. I didn't reply. Not because I hated her, I didn't. But because I finally understood I didn't need to perform grief to earn space. I didn't need to sit in someone else's house and beg to be acknowledged. I was done asking for what should have been given freely. I was done shrinking to fit into other people's comfort zones. The next morning, I opened the curtains in the living room and let the light pour in. The world didn't feel brand new, but it didn't feel heavy anymore either. Some wounds stay sore, some memories still sting, but healing, I've learned, isn't about erasing, it's about carrying differently. I brewed a cup of herbal tea, wrapped myself in the old blanket my dad used to leave on the back of the couch, and sat on the balcony as the neighborhood stirred awake. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to explain why I was happy. And that was enough. Sometimes, justice isn't revenge. It's remembering who you are, and refusing to shrink again. In the end, this wasn't just a story about a ruined wedding. It was about reclaiming your voice in a family that never truly listened. Sometimes the loudest form of strength is quiet refusal. You don't have to scream to draw the line. You just have to stop stepping back. Have you ever had to protect your peace from someone who was supposed to love you? Tell us in the comments. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more real-life family stories that hit close to home.